Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that you handed them everything? Your heart, your faith, and even your savings account? I did. I believed love meant sharing everything. I believed marriage meant safety. Until one morning, standing barefoot in my own kitchen, he threw a scalding cup of coffee into my face. In front of our son. All because I asked, "Who did you give our money to?" I wish that was the worst part. But it wasn't. That moment wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The beginning of discovering just how much of my life had been a lie. And the truth? It had nothing to do with money. Not really. You wouldn't think much of our house if you drove past it. Just another neat little home tucked away in a quiet suburb outside of Cincinnati. White siding. 2 cars in the driveway. A red tricycle parked half forgotten near the garage door. One American flag gently fluttering from the porch. People called our life stable. To be honest, I used to call it that too. My husband, Daniel, worked in finance, hedge funds or portfolio something. I stopped pretending to understand the specifics long ago. All I knew was that he wore pressed shirts, always carried his phone, and had a knack for sounding important when he talked to clients. I was a second-grade teacher at the local elementary school. Simple work, but I loved it. Loved the kids. Loved coming home with glitter in my hair and crayon stains on my sleeves. We had been married for 12 years. And for most of that time, I believed in us. We weren't perfect, but who is? We argued about the thermostat, grocery budgets, and who forgot to take the trash out, but we also had our Sunday morning pancake rituals and our quiet smiles across the dinner table. We had Caleb, our son, our center. He was 8 years old, all freckles and big questions. The kind of boy who wanted to save ants from puddles and cried when the family cat died. I used to look at him and think, we must be doing something right. And so, I saved. I budgeted every dollar that didn't go into Caleb's clothes or Daniel's dry cleaning. Every bit I could tuck away, I did, into a joint savings account. Not a secret. Not a trap. A goal. A future. I dreamed of a house with a real backyard. One where Caleb could climb a tree, where I could plant sunflowers in spring. Nothing big. Just ours. Daniel used to smile and say, "You're the responsible one." I thought that was a compliment. But now, looking back, I wonder if it was his way of handing off the weight, pretending to praise me while quietly stepping away. I was the one clipping coupons, checking grocery apps for sales, holding back on new shoes so Caleb could have what he needed. And he? He always had an excuse. Work's been tight this month. Big client dropped suddenly. Don't worry, babe. Once this deal closes, I'll handle the down payment myself. And I believed him. Because when you love someone, you fill in the silence with trust. When you don't have an answer, you make one up that still lets you sleep at night. But even then, little things were starting to crack through the calm. There were phone calls that made him leave the room. Weekends when he said he had to pop into the office, but came back smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. And always, that damn phone, locked with a Face ID, glued to his side like a second skin. Still, I clung to the image we had built. The life I had curated like a Pinterest board come to life. I told myself, you're just tired. Don't make trouble. Don't be one of those wives. And here's the paradox no one warned you about. The more energy you pour into creating a perfect life, the harder it is to admit it might not be real. You become the prisoner of your own dream. So I kept pouring. I kept cooking his favorite meals even when he came home late. I kept reminding Caleb, Daddy's just working hard for us. I kept smiling at neighbors and laughing with my teacher friends in the staff room while inside, a seed of doubt was growing roots. But there was one moment. A quiet, insignificant moment. It was a Wednesday night. I had made baked ziti. The house smelled like cheese and oregano. Caleb was telling me about a reading assignment, Daniel scrolling his phone as he ate. I looked over and said, without thinking, You know, we're almost at our savings goal for the house. He paused. Blinked. Then smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's great, he said. You really are amazing with money. And then he kissed my forehead and went back to his phone. But in that moment, something shifted. Not in the air. In me. I didn't know it yet. But the girl who wanted to build a home was about to find out she was never part of the blueprint. Every couple has their arrangement. Some split things 50-50. Others keep it old school, one works, one stays home. Ours? Well, I thought we were a team. The savings account was in both our names. But I was the one visiting the bank. I was the one logging in late at night to check the balance, running mental math while folding laundry. Every month, like a ritual, I deposited what I could. Sometimes it was $200. Sometimes $20. A little here, a little there. Scraped from couponing, skipping takeout, reusing Caleb's old notebooks for class prep. I remember once telling Daniel, "Hey, we're almost at 12,000. He didn't even look up from his phone. That's great, babe, he mumbled. See? You're amazing at this money stuff. I'll take care of the bigger picture. The bigger picture. He said that phrase a lot. When he forgot to pay the electricity bill one winter, it was because he was handling bigger things. When I asked why he never checked the joint account, he'd laugh. Because I trust you. You've got the day-to-day. I've got the long game. And maybe that's how it should have felt, like a partnership. But if I'm honest, his words began to feel less like trust. And more like distance disguised as praise. Looking back, I see it now. He was never part of the planning. Not when I made our first budget spreadsheet on the kitchen table. Not when I put together a binder labeled Future House with listings printed off Zillow. He'd smile, nod, sometimes kiss my cheek, but his eyes never landed on the page. Maybe I didn't want to see it then. Because if I did, I would have had to ask myself the question I wasn't ready for. Why is he always one step removed from our future? There's this cruel irony about love. When you care about someone, you do the emotional labor for them. You write their intentions in your own head, fill in the blanks with hope, explain away the silence with compassion. He's just stressed. He works too hard. He's doing all of this for us. Meanwhile, I was carrying both the worry and the hope. Both the house dreams and the grocery bags. I remember one particular evening. It's strange how memory picks these random, quiet moments and brands them into your mind. I had just put Caleb to bed. The hallway still smelled like bubblegum toothpaste and bedtime lotion. Daniel was sitting on the couch, sipping whiskey, scrolling his phone. I walked over, curled up next to him, and said, "You know, if we keep this up, we'll hit $15,000 by spring." He didn't react. So I added, lightheartedly, "I've been thinking, maybe we should actually start touring open houses? Just for fun?" He looked at me. Smiled. That practiced, slow smile of his. And he said, "We'll get there. Just not yet." That was it. No follow-up. No excitement. Just a delay disguised as reassurance. I didn't argue. I just leaned into him, heart full of questions I didn't ask. Because here's the hardest part to admit. Sometimes, we choose not to ask. Because we're afraid of the answers. And I had gotten very good at ignoring signs. Like the fact that he never checked the bank app, not once. Like how I never actually saw his paychecks go into that account. Like how he always said, "I'll transfer some later," but later never came. I convinced myself it didn't matter, because I was handling things. The groceries, the school supplies, the birthday party decorations, the monthly savings log taped inside the pantry cabinet. "You're amazing with money," he'd say. And I was. But not once did he ask what our balance was. Not once did he ask, "How close are we now?" He was always just, watching from the sidelines. A spectator in the life we were supposedly building together. And yet, there were no smoking guns. No glaring betrayals. Just a hollow absence in places where presence should have been. No fights, no accusations, just quiet neglect wrapped in charm. And what do you even call that? It's not abuse, right? It's not betrayal. Not yet. It's just disinterest. Indifference. But if you've ever felt it, you know. There's a loneliness that cuts deeper when the person ignoring you sleeps beside you at night. So I poured more of myself into our little rituals. Family movie night every Friday. Pancakes with blueberries on Sunday. I kept smiling for Caleb. Kept holding space. Hoping, believing, if I just gave a little more, maybe he'd finally meet me halfway. But every month, I was the only one walking to the bank. Every month, I was the only one counting toward our future. And every month, he was counting on the fact that I wouldn't notice. It started with a routine check. Nothing dramatic. No flashing red lights. Just me, sitting in the teacher's lounge during recess, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, and pulling up our joint account on my phone like I always did. I didn't even know I was looking for anything. I just wanted to see the numbers climb. Wanted to feel like my efforts, the coupons, the skipped haircuts, the thrift store finds, were worth something. But that day, something stopped me mid-sip. There it was. A withdrawal for $783.12. Labeled, ATM, out of network. Strange. We never used out-of-network ATMs. Daniel always said they were a rip-off, a tax on the forgetful. And $783? That's not a forgetful number. That's deliberate. I scrolled further. 2 days before that, $520.00. Before that? $1,100. All marked, transfer, external. I felt my stomach tighten, like someone had pressed their fingers into my gut and refused to let go. My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling slightly. Maybe it was for bills, I told myself. Or something for work. He'd mentioned something vague last week. Didn't he? That night, I waited until Caleb was asleep. Daniel was watching something on TV, sports, probably, laughing at something I wasn't invited to understand. I sat beside him on the couch, trying to sound casual. Hey, I said, I noticed a few large withdrawals from the savings account. Was that you? He didn't look up. Yeah. Work stuff. I paused. What kind of work stuff takes $1,100? He finally glanced my way. Not startled. Not guilty. Just irritated. You're looking at the account during your lunch break now? That was his first move, deflect. I just happened to check, I replied, keeping my tone steady. The amounts just seemed unusual. That's all. He set the remote down a little too hard. Jesus, Emily. Do you not trust me? Seriously? You think I'm what, stealing from us now? Second move, guilt. I opened my mouth to respond, but he was already on his feet. You know how much pressure I'm under. I don't need to come home and get interrogated like some damn criminal. Third move, anger. And just like that, the conversation ended, not with answers, but with a slammed bedroom door. I sat there, stunned, listening to the muffled sounds of him cursing under his breath as he changed for bed. The next morning, he kissed my cheek like nothing happened. Made his coffee. Checked his phone. Left for work. Not one word about the withdrawals. Not one effort to clarify or comfort. And still, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that I was overreacting. That maybe there was some explanation, something I hadn't thought of, some context I was missing. But that's the thing about suspicion. Once it's in your bloodstream, it doesn't just fade away. It lingers. Mutates. Grows teeth. I started checking the account every day. Some weeks were quiet, no activity at all. Others had more of those silent, unannounced withdrawals. Never round numbers. Never neat. Always messy, like someone trying to stay just under the radar. $437. $915. $689.50. It was like watching water drip through a crack you didn't know existed. Until one day the whole wall gives way. And through it all, Daniel acted normal. Kissed Caleb on the forehead. Cracked jokes at dinner. Held my waist a little too casually when guests were over. He never mentioned the account again. I tried once more. Just once. A Sunday morning. Quiet. Caleb still asleep. The sunlight turning the kitchen gold. I'd feel better, I said, if we could sit down and talk about our finances, just make sure we're aligned. He didn't even pretend to consider it. Oh my God, again, he muttered. Emily, we've been married 12 years. If you still think I'm hiding something, maybe you should look in the mirror. That was the first time I realized he had learned exactly what to say to shut me down. Not with facts. Not with truth. But with just enough shame to make me question myself. And here's the cruelest twist of all. He didn't even need to lie well. He just needed me to feel guilty for asking. Because guilt is quieter than suspicion. And quieter people are easier to control. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing extraordinary about the day itself. It was rainy. Gray. Caleb forgot his lunchbox. I was grading spelling tests after dinner. The kind of quiet domesticity I used to find comfort in, simple routines that filled the hours between sunrise and exhaustion. Daniel had left his phone on the kitchen counter. That never happened. His phone was an extension of him, always in his pocket, his hand, his lap. Even when he went to shower, it came with him. I used to tease him about it, afraid the stock market's gonna crash while you condition your hair. That night, though, it just sat there. Unlocked. Unwatched. And it lit up. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. Because when something already doesn't feel right, even silence becomes suspicious. A text. Just a preview. M. Nan Duok Roy. Come on, you on Red Heart. I stared at the screen like it had slapped me. Not because of the heart emoji. Not even because of the word love. But because it was in Vietnamese. My language. My words. Not his. Daniel couldn't speak Vietnamese. He'd never even tried. He always said, everyone here speaks English, babe. It's not like we're living in Hanoi. So who was writing to him, in my tongue? Who was thanking him, loving him, in the language of my childhood? My hand shook. My vision tunneled. I told myself, maybe it's a scam message. Maybe it's spam. Maybe it's work. Maybe. That word is dangerous. It gives doubt a comfortable chair to sit in. It lets hope dress itself in logic and play pretend until you can't tell the difference anymore. I put the phone down like it burned me. Walked away like I hadn't seen anything. Because part of me still wanted to believe there was some explanation. Some version of the story that didn't end with my world splintering open. That night, I barely slept. Daniel, lying next to me, breathing slow and steady, oblivious. Or pretending to be. And I lay there asking myself questions I already knew the answers to, but wasn't ready to accept. Who was she? How long had it been going on? Had Caleb ever met her? Had I? You know that saying, if you have to investigate the person beside you, you already know the truth? It hit me like a whisper in the dark. Because deep down, I did know. I knew from the way he never met my eyes when I brought up the future. I knew from the way he flinched when I touched his phone. I knew from the way he had slowly, almost artfully, detached himself from every part of our life that felt real. But my heart? My heart was a fool. It still wanted proof. It still wanted him to deny it, to fight for us, to make me feel stupid for doubting. Because sometimes, what hurts more than betrayal is having no one argue with you when you say, "You're hurting me." The days after the message blurred together. I started noticing patterns, not just in our bank account, but in his behavior. There were more late meetings. More last-minute client dinners. More nights where he came home with a glow on his face but no explanation on his lips. I started taking mental screenshots of everything. The receipts that didn't match the timeline. The voice memos I found tucked in his deleted files. The faint smell of perfume on his shirt, sweet, floral, not mine. But still. I said nothing. I still packed his lunch. Still laid out Caleb's school clothes. Still smiled when the neighbors waved. Because the human heart is stubborn. Because grief begins before the loss ever finishes. Because no matter how many signs I saw, I was still in the house we built together, still pretending the foundation hadn't already cracked beneath my feet. And here's the cruelest part. Even as I grew more certain of his lies, I kept hoping he would see me. Not as the wife he was outgrowing. Not as the background to his double life. But as the woman who once gave him everything. I wasn't ready to be the one who blew things up. I wasn't ready to become the story people whispered about. And so, I waited. Watched. Collected every subtle fracture, every flinch, every unspoken answer. Waiting for the moment when my silence would finally shatter. It was a morning like any other. But isn't that always how it starts? Nothing about the sky warned me. No thunder. No flickering lights. Just soft sunlight crawling through the blinds, the hum of the refrigerator, the smell of toast and freshly brewed coffee. Caleb was sitting at the kitchen table, legs dangling off the chair, spooning cereal into his mouth with half focus. His hair was still messy from sleep. He had a little milk on his upper lip, and his favorite dinosaur pajamas looked a size too small now. Daniel stood near the counter, pouring coffee into his mug. He was wearing the blue dress shirt I'd ironed the night before. He whistled a tune under his breath. Something upbeat. Something that didn't match the silence rising in my chest. My heart thudded in slow, deliberate beats. I had barely slept. The account. The messages. The perfume. The missing money. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times, on the drive home from work, in the shower, while brushing my teeth. And yet, now that I was standing there, holding the printed bank statement in my trembling hands, my throat tightened like a fist around a scream. I looked at Caleb. Then at Daniel. And I reminded myself, I am not crazy. I am not overreacting. I am not the villain here. I sat across from him at the table. Laid the statement down between us. He looked up, slowly. His smile faded just a bit, not gone, but paused. I kept my voice steady, though I could feel the storm climbing my spine. There's a $12,000 withdrawal from our savings account. His brow furrowed. Okay. It was transferred in parts. Over 5 weeks. All to the same external account. I tracked it. I swallowed hard. Who did you send it to, Daniel? He blinked. Set his coffee down. Straightened up. Emily, seriously? You're going through our financials now? No denial. No shock. Just annoyance. I've always gone through them, I replied. That's not new. But what is new is $12,000 disappearing without a word. He looked at Caleb, still crunching cereal, oblivious. Then back at me. You want to do this now? In front of him? I stared him down. Don't make this about timing. I've asked quietly. I've asked gently. I've asked like a wife who trusts her husband. But now I'm asking like a woman who's not going to be ignored anymore. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. It's work stuff, he said, too quickly. What kind of work takes 12 grand of our savings, Daniel? He hesitated. Just for a second. And that second was everything. You see, when someone lies out of instinct, it's practiced. Polished. Smooth like river stones. But when someone lies and hesitates, even briefly, you know the truth is stuck somewhere in their throat, begging to be let out. He exhaled loudly, shook his head. You've always been like this, you know? Suspicious. Paranoid. It's exhausting. And there it was again, the deflection. The manipulation. The guilt grenade. Thrown with precision, meant to shatter whatever clarity I had left. But I didn't flinch this time. I'm not asking as a test, I said. I'm not here to fight. I just want to know the truth. He stood up. Paced to the sink. Back to the table. Avoided my eyes. Drop it, Emily, he said. Seriously. Just drop it. I felt the heat rise in my chest. You owe me an answer. He didn't move. Didn't speak. So I pushed the statement closer toward him. Pointed at the numbers. The dates. The evidence. Daniel, I'm not your assistant. I'm not your fool. I'm your wife. And I deserve to know who you've been giving our money to. My voice cracked at the end, but not with weakness. With rage. And maybe something else too. Something like grief. Because even then, some part of me was still hoping he'd come clean. That he'd break, crumble, apologize. Tell me it was a mistake. A misunderstanding. A desperate attempt to fix something gone wrong. But he didn't. He looked at me, finally. And in his eyes, I didn't see remorse. I didn't see panic. I saw contempt. As if I had done something unforgivable. And that was when I knew. Whatever this moment was, whatever this marriage had been, it wasn't coming back from here. He stood still. His hand rested on the counter beside the coffee mug. His eyes, those eyes I once trusted enough to build a life with, were sharp now. Cold. Hardened into something unfamiliar. He didn't shout. Not yet. His voice dropped low, almost a growl. Controlled rage. I'm tired of this, he said. Tired of you playing detective. Tired of being treated like I'm on trial in my own house. He stepped closer. I work. I provide. I put a roof over our heads. And all I get is suspicion? I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The room felt too small. The air too thick. Across the table, Caleb had stopped chewing. His spoon hovered midair, his eyes wide. You act like you're some saint because you save a few dollars here and there, Daniel went on. But what about what I do? What I carry? I stood frozen. Who do you think you are, he sneered, to question me like this? Then, without warning, he grabbed the mug. And before I could move, before I could even breathe, he threw the coffee in my face. It wasn't boiling. But it was hot. And it hit me like a wall. Not just the sting. Not just the shock of it running down my cheek, soaking my blouse, splashing across the printed bank statement on the table. But the sound. The sharp gasp from Caleb. The clatter of his spoon hitting the bowl. The silence that followed. A silence so loud, it roared in my ears. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, burning, not from the heat, but from something deeper. Something that scalded all the way down to my soul. My son was watching. My 8-year-old boy, sitting in his pajamas, with milk dripping down his chin and terror painted across his face. And in that moment, drenched in coffee, humiliated, raw, I realized something terrifying. I felt nothing. Not pain. Not fury. Not fear. Just emptiness. Because the worst kind of hurt isn't loud. It's not thrown fists or shouted curses. It's the moment you look at someone you've loved for 12 years and see a stranger looking back. I wiped my cheek with the back of my hand. The liquid mixed with tears I didn't remember allowing. It dripped down my collarbone, onto the floor, into the cracks of our kitchen tiles. Caleb whispered, "Mom?" My knees trembled. But I stayed standing. I turned to him, slowly. His lips were quivering. His eyes filled with something too big for his small body to hold: fear, confusion, shame. And I hated it. I hated that this was the memory being etched into his childhood. Not the birthdays or bedtime stories. Not the pancakes or zoo trips. But this. The moment his father, his hero, hurt his mother in front of him. Daniel stepped back, maybe realizing what he'd done. Maybe not. He didn't say I'm sorry. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just stared, unblinking. Like a man waiting for me to explode, so he could call me the crazy one. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. I looked down at the coffee pooled on the floor, dark and steaming. Then I looked at my son, my reason. And I said, quietly, to no one in particular, I don't feel pain in my skin. I feel it in the silence. Because right now, I'm not a wife. I'm not even a mother. I'm just a ghost standing in the ruins of a family that used to be real. I didn't say a word. Not to him. Not to myself. Not even to Caleb. I just turned away, my face still damp, my dignity crumpled in a puddle at my feet, and walked straight to the bedroom. My body moved on instinct. I grabbed the first overnight bag I saw. Tossed in some clothes. Toothbrush. Socks. A hoodie for Caleb. A bottle of Tylenol. Caleb trailed behind me silently, holding his stuffed dinosaur like it might protect him from the things he didn't understand. In the hallway, Daniel called after me. Seriously? You're leaving? Over this? He didn't sound sorry. He sounded inconvenienced. I didn't turn around. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't fall apart. I zipped the bag. Took Caleb's hand. And I walked out the front door without looking back. The morning air hit me like a slap, cold, sharp, and painfully real. The sun still rose. The neighbor's sprinklers still ticked away. The world didn't pause just because mine had collapsed. I drove without thinking. Just drove. Wound through familiar streets that had never looked so foreign. Past the grocery store where we used to laugh about overpriced apples. Past the park where Daniel taught Caleb to ride his bike. Memories clung to every corner like cobwebs I couldn't tear down fast enough. And then, almost without meaning to, I found myself in front of my mother's house. I hadn't been there in months. We hadn't spoken much since the holidays. Not because of any big fight, just the quiet drifting that happens when life gets too loud. I sat in the car for a minute, engine running. My hands still shaking. I almost turned back. Almost convinced myself it wasn't bad enough to show up like this. Almost believed Daniel's voice in my head whispering, "You're overreacting." But then I looked at Caleb. He was staring out the window, silent. Still clutching his dinosaur. His small voice broke the stillness. "Mom, does Dad hate you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat closed, and for the first time since the coffee hit my skin, I cried. I cried like the dam had finally cracked. Not because of the pain. Not even because of Daniel. But because my son had to ask me that question. Because somewhere in his little heart, he knew what he'd witnessed wasn't normal, and he didn't know what to call it. That was the moment I knew I had done the right thing. Not just for me, but for him. We walked up to the door. My mother answered in her robe, eyes wide. One look at me, and she opened her arms. No questions. No judgment. Just warmth I hadn't realized I was starving for. I slept that night in my childhood bedroom, on the same mattress I used to cry into after high school heartbreaks. Caleb curled up beside me. Neither of us said much. There wasn't anything left to say. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I needed answers. Not just about the money, but about the woman, the message, the withdrawal trail, the lies he built like scaffolding around our life. I logged into our joint bank account, downloaded the statements going back a year, started cross-referencing every strange transaction, every cash withdrawal, every wire transfer. It didn't take long. There were patterns. Names I didn't recognize. Payments that didn't align with anything we'd ever discussed. Hotel bookings. Western Union transfers. Multiple payments labeled under vague companies with no websites. And then, an email popped up. One I'd almost forgotten I had access to. Daniel's old Gmail, still linked to our shared tax portal. I clicked in. At first, it was mundane: invoices, work updates, spam. Then, buried in a folder labeled Archives, I saw it. Photos. Of a woman. Younger. Beautiful. Holding a toddler. Smiling up at Daniel like he was the sun. And him, kneeling, holding the child's hand like a proud father. Attached was a receipt. Private school tuition, $4,600. Another. Monthly support, B-Tran, $2,000. I stared at the screen, numb. Tried to feel anger. Tried to feel anything. But all I felt was betrayed. Not just because he had given away our money. Not just because he had a child I didn't know existed. But because, for 12 years, I had built my life around a man who had been building his somewhere else. There was no accident. No misunderstanding. No explanation that could soften the truth. It wasn't just financial betrayal. It wasn't even just emotional infidelity. It was abandonment in slow motion. And the worst part? I had thanked him for letting me handle the small things, while he spent our future on someone else's. The following Monday, I sat acros. Her name was Claire. A divorce attorney recommended by a colleague at school. SH. Didn't wince when I described the coffee. Didn't ask if I was sure. She just took notes. Physical evidence? She asked. I handed over photos: my blouse, still stained. My flushed skin. Caleb's written account, in his shaky 8-year-old handwriting. And then, the bank statements. The tuition receipts. The support transfers. Claire's expression didn't change. But her pen slowed. "You've got more than enough," she said. "This is textbook. Emotional abuse. Financial fraud. Parental endangerment." She paused. "And what you did, taking your son, leaving, documenting everything, that was exactly right." I nodded, but something in me still trembled. Not fear. Not grief. Just the ache of knowing that once I filed this, it would be real. Permanent. I'd no longer be someone enduring a broken marriage. I'd be someone ending one. I signed the papers with a hand that barely stopped shaking. But when I looked up, when Claire placed her palm gently over mine, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Stability. She assured me that the law was on my side. That the court would demand restitution for the missing money. That with documented abuse, custody would almost certainly fall to me. That Daniel could no longer twist my silence into submission. For the first time in a long time, I believed her. 2 weeks later, I returned to my classroom. My students ran to me like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't spent the past month unraveling quietly in the corner of my world. They brought me notes. Drawings. "We missed you," scribbled in crayons. And in that moment, surrounded by their noisy laughter and the scent of construction paper, I remembered who I was outside of my marriage. I was someone who mattered. Someone who nurtured. Someone who still had a life worth living, even if it looked nothing like the one I had planned. I stayed late that first day, reorganizing bookshelves, erasing old lessons off the whiteboard, rewriting my own name in clean, steady strokes. Ms. Nguyen. Not Mrs. Not his anything. Each afternoon, I picked up Caleb from school. He clung to my hand a little tighter now. Asked more questions. Slept with the light on. But slowly, inch by inch, I watched the tension leave his shoulders. He smiled again. Laughed. Drew pictures with 3 people again, me, him, and a house with a garden. No dad. I didn't correct him. Daniel, of course, tried everything. He sent emails. Called. Left voicemails masked as apologies. Let's not make this ugly. Think of the family. I was under pressure. You know how I get. Yes. I knew exactly how he got. The court ordered him to return $11,482 to our savings account. Not the full 12, but enough to matter. Enough to mark it in ink that what he did wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. He fought for partial custody. He lost. Because sometimes the system works. Sometimes the truth, documented and undeniable, is louder than manipulation. I never confronted the woman. Never needed to. My battle was never with her. It was with the version of me that thought I needed to stay small, soft, silent, to be loved. And now? Now I wake up without that weight on my chest. I make my own coffee. I drink it slowly. I take walks. I sleep better. I laugh without watching my volume. There are days when the ache still visits me, like an old wound catching the rain. But even then, I know I'm free. And maybe the scars will stay. Maybe they're meant to. But I'm not ashamed of them anymore. Because every time I look in the mirror, I remember. Coffee can be hot. But betrayal burns through the soul. And the morning I washed my face clean of it was the same morning I washed my past away. If the person you love the most becomes the very first one who teaches you to stop believing in love, what do? Do you forgive them, hoping the hurt will somehow teach you grace? Or do you walk away, carrying the pain, but choosing never to pass it on? I walked away. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I couldn't let my son grow up thinking that love is made of silence, fear, and apology without change. I couldn't let him believe that the sound of coffee hitting skin was part of marriage. That a mother's stillness in the face of cruelty was strength. That a father's betrayal was something you simply accept. No. I walked away because I wanted my son to know. Love does not live where respect has died. Love does not raise its voice to win. Love does not throw. Or shame. Or disappear. And most of all, love does not ask you to disappear inside of it. I chose to walk away because I loved my son enough to break the cycle. And I finally loved myself enough to believe I deserved more than survival. Now it's your turn. If the person who once held your heart turned out to be the one who broke it the most, would you forgive? Or would you walk away? Tell me. Because sometimes, just saying it out loud is the first step toward healing.